So thank you, Ian. Just to contextualize this a little bit, I've been working with the centre now since the start, and with Steve and Di, I've been helping to lead the configurations for sustainable industrial systems. We started, we actually wrote the bid along with the rest of the centre bid about 5 years ago now, and one thing we wanted to do was to really try to look at how we could do things differently. So looking at the future, looking at some of the trends out to 2050, out to 2100, implies that we need to do things radically different. We need to make things in completely different ways. We need to ask whether we can even make things the way we're doing now, whether we can even make things at all. So we set ourselves a pretty big challenge. How can we frame manufacturing in terms of radical carbon dioxide reductions, how we can half the resource use at least, and also how we can quadruple the GDP value of our exports. Of course, this is pretty hard. This is approximately factor 10 if you follow the sustainability discourse, and we know that even some of our exemplar companies like Unilever are having difficulty with factor 4. So pretty hard. In the Foresight report, the future of manufacturing that we contributed to a couple of years ago, we pointed out that this has to be framed in terms of complexity of the system. So we can't just focus on carbon, we can't just focus on resources alone. We have to treat these as interdependent and interrelated systems, and also include some of the things that we don't necessarily include. We look at things like pollution, and we don't necessarily look at population growth, so bringing this in. We hardly look at biodiversity. So how we actually think of manufacturing in the context of what is really the way we actually live on the planet. So a few weeks ago, actually probably about 3 months ago, Steve, Di, and I tried to take stock of where we were. We've been doing active research now for 4 years, and we have a number of very talented PhD students who have provided the material I'm going to speak about. So this is the investment that we've put into the CSIS stream. You can see a vast amount of researchers, lots of person years, and also a good number of organizations that we've actually actively worked for on our left-hand side. And we've developed quite a lot of impact from everything from the Foresight report that I mentioned all the way through to workshops, sustainable value that you've seen this morning, and a number of spin-off projects. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of the work that has come out of this, and I really do encourage everybody to go and see the posters. Speak to our PhD researchers, because they're the ones who will tell you exactly what's been going on. So some of the key things that we've actually learnt, and fortunately the speakers before me have actually framed this in very practical ways, so I'm going to try to draw on some of the things that they've actually said. But the first thing that I think we need to think about is how we actually reframe for systems. When we think about systems thinking, when we think about complexity, then creating narratives that really deviate from how we think about in terms of business as usual is particularly tricky. And we believe that if we continue to have a focus just on products, then we're really missing a lot of the story. Similarly, moving to services and functions, while that's an interesting progression, it's really not enough. So the way that we're, and this is really a work in progress, so I apologize to the PhD researchers as I go through this. We believe that to really make some impact in terms of systems, we have to look at activities. We have to look at the outcomes that we want from the things that we're doing and place our product and service design within the context of those particular outcomes. As you'll all be aware, the outcomes that we're really interested in are things like biosphere integrity, are things like social integrity. And this implies that the techno optimist solution is relevant to an extent, but to really get very much further, we have to bring in a lot of understanding about social systems as well. So we go from our product. We've mocked one up here from you. So taking food system. So what does sustainable food look like? We don't believe that's really a relevant question. And we think of this in terms of outputs of healthy individuals. And we go from what could be loosely conceived of as a value chain. And we look at everything else that can actually contribute to what a healthy system, a healthy individual actually means. So we're reframing as a systemic intervention here, which means we're not really that interested just in food manufacturers, just in supermarkets and in agriculture, so the standard value chain here, but also in a number of the other things that actually contribute to what it means to be healthy. This increases the complexity. Obviously, we're not just looking at one particular thing. We're looking at a lot of different sectors that aren't necessarily related in any particular way, and usually don't work together. As Carmel said, this is pretty hard if we look at this. And so the primary mode of inquiry that we believe is necessary for this is action. We have to actually get out and do something. And what I'm going to try to show you is two particular nuances on what we believe, how we believe action should be framed. Just to give you an idea of the challenge behind some of this, this is a systems map that one of my very overachieving master's students developed about 5 years ago. This is only a small systems map, by the way. What this represents is an idea of the drivers behind individual consumption. So she was concerned about obesity and wanted to try to map the various components of the system that contributed to obesity. Everything from looking at agriculture and manufacturing, all the way through to looking at how people actually perceive themselves. And if we do a standard systems analysis, we go and try and work out where the leverage point is. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with Donella Meadows' work, but I would challenge anybody to try to intervene in any sort of predictive way into a system like that. The idea with these systems is that they are far too complex to do anything to control, to predict. And so what we get is a whole bunch of possibilities. But until we actually do something and collapse them into actualities, then we can't tell anything about that system, really. So this is the key. But our action has two particular attributes here. One is that we believe that we need to be working with unusual partners, people who we don't necessarily work with in normal day life. And we need to develop some sort of shared understanding of how to get to particular places, or at least point us in the right direction. So the first, how to kiss frogs. So this is one of Steve's best stories, which I'll leave him to tell you. But working with unusual partners increases the scope for innovation. When we work with the same partners, we have the same sort of shaped innovation. We can do business as usual. If we start working with strange people, strange companies so an example, the Schwapping M&S Oxfam example is a fabulous example of working with unusual partners. we increase the options that we actually have to do something a bit more different. And this is quite an important concept. We believe that we can't control or predict complex systems, so we have to try doing something that may result in something a little bit strange coming out and may actually go in the direction that we actually want. And I think that's one of the key take-homes from systems is that it's not linear. We can't actually start from the beginning and hope to end up where we want to. This, of course, is difficult. We'll be working with people who we aren't necessarily able to communicate with. We don't have common language, common vocabularies with. And so we need to be creative and patient in how we work with people. Give you an example, circular economy. That much hyped concept at the moment. There are a number of different varieties, number of different flavors of circular economy. You can go and speak to various people who are doing various works on CE, and you'll get different descriptions of what the circular economy is. So trying to make sense of this, trying to work together to actually try to understand how people can communicate, creating common vocabularies and patterns that try to contribute to fundamental knowledge about the questions we really can ask. But also, when we bring people together, actually understanding some of these interactions from a sociological perspective as well, understanding things like power relationships and how different manufacturers, different organizations actually influence each other in subtle and unpredictable ways. So that increases the variety, increases the scope for innovation. But it also allows us to de-risk, we think. If lots of people move together, we think that they can take bigger steps. We think they can be a bit more radical than they actually are, so move beyond the incremental. And the reason behind that being that we're moving whole ecosystems. Instead of trying to fit incrementally or trying to fit radically into a system that doesn't actually allow us to exist in, we're moving everything with us to make change easier to happen. So this this idea, we have to work together. We have to actually create some sort of shared understanding, sense-making, looking at scenarios. And so we put up this 2x2 matrix. So if you're a management consultant, please feel free to actually take it and use it. We believe that when we talk about the sustainability discourse now, people tend to gravitate towards an idea of collaboration without any real nuance of different types of collaboration. And so we believe competition is just as important as collaboration. We believe that all of them should coexist, but we also believe that things like, so what we've exemplified by crowdsourcing here, trying to federate different ideas. So if we look back at the Brundtland report, we look at things like common but differentiated responsibilities, and we see that if we actually have an understanding of what directions we need to go, we don't have to be working together with people. We can just all go in one direction, hopefully end up at least in a better place. So finally, we need to experiment. We've seen this. We've seen this with the project redress. And we start with reframing the system. We work with unusual partners to expand our innovation space. And then we try to experiment. We do lots of things that may fail, they may succeed, but we learn from them, and then we take action. And the key message from this is that Sanjeev's elephant experiment, we don't know what we're looking at really. It's too complex to really define. So is it a tusk? Is it a sphere? Is it a spear? Is it a snake? Is it a tree? Experimentation and actually reflecting on the learning is much more important than doing exactly the right thing. So those are the 4 points. This is what we're doing next. we're developing a workshop, a set of workshops to actually try to go through some of these concepts and help people to try to make sense of them, and I think probably help us to try to make sense of them and do something different. So if you're interested in talking to us about this, come and see, Steve, Di, go and see them, come and see me. We'll all give you different responses. So you probably want to come and see all of us. And I'm going to stop now. What I want to do is just leave up our PhD posters, our PhD research. Please go and see them, track them down, find out what they're doing, and see how they actually fit into this whole thing. So thank you very much.